Imagine for a second that you are uh, commanding the most powerful, technologically advanced military machine on the entire planet. Like you have tens of thousands of veteran soldiers, right?
The absolute best of the best.
Exactly. You've got these massive siege cannons that can shatter stone walls. You have elite armored cavalry that has, literally never lost. You basically just draw a line on a map and expect victory to follow that line.
Right. It's almost a given at that point.
Yeah, but then you actually march into the eastern Himalayas, and you end up losing the war, not because the enemy had better weapons, but because, well, their walls were made of wet mud and it started to rain.
It's just the ultimate historical reality check, It's that moment when this pristine, totally predictable chessboard of imperial warfare gets completely submerged in an uncontrollable swamp.
It's wild. Welcome to another deep dive. I am so thrilled you are sitting here with us today because the stack of source material we have in front of us is genuinely it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are exploring this forgotten epic collision of empires from the 1660s.
Yeah, the Mughal Empire.
Right. We're looking at Emperor Aurangzeb's massive military expedition. It's led by this brilliant, absolutely ruthless general named Mir Jumla, and they are marching straight into the dense, mysterious, and frankly deadly realms of Cooch Behar and Assam.
And, before we even look at the battlefield itself, the actual physical text we're using for this deep dive is a fascinating artifact all on its own. What's fascinating here is the lineage of it.
Oh, the historical telephone game. It's incredible. We were working from a document called the Tarikh-i Asham. But getting to the English notes we have right here, it required so many steps. Like, we're looking at a 19th century French translation by Thêodore Pavie. But Pavie didn't translate the original. He translated a Hindustani version by Mir Bahadur Ali Husseini, who was translating the original Persian chronicle.
Yeah, and that original Persian chronicle was written by Shihab and Talish, and he wasn't just some historian tucked away in a library in Delhi years later. Talish was an administrative secretary embedded right there in the vanguard.
An actual eyewitness.
Exactly. He was physically present in the mud, the blood, the monsoon rains. So we get this incredibly visceral, real-time account.
Filtered through Persian, then Hindustani, then French, and now us. There's this great metaphor in the translator's preface, actually. They describe translating this text as being like stripping a man of his most fitting garments, laying him out bare, and then trying to dress him again in completely different clothes.
Which is such a striking image.
Right. You just have to hope the new clothes fit the original frame. So our mission today is to follow this campaign from its incredibly arrogant beginning to its totally waterlogged end.
We're looking at what happens when an organized war machine crashes into an impenetrable jungle. And we have to be completely impartial here because Talish, our author, was highly biased. He viewed this as a holy war against infidels. But as analysts, we are reading between the lines to see the geography and the tactics.
Exactly. And we'll also look at how the 17th century jungle war eventually led to this entire region being swallowed up centuries later by, of all things, British accountants and tea merchants. But to understand why this huge war started, we have to look at the political shockwave that kicked it off.
Right, because this wasn't just a random land grab by the Mughals.
Set the stage for us. We're in the mid-1600s. The Mughal Empire is massive. But in 1654, the emperor, Shah Jahan, the guy who built the Taj Mahal, right? He gets seriously ill. And when I hear that, I just think of royal doctors. But geopolitically, what does that mean?
Well, in an absolute monarchy, the physical health of the ruler is directly tied to the strength of the borders. The minute word leaks out that Shah Jahan is incapacitated, neighboring kingdoms see a window of opportunity.
Like an invitation for adventurism.
Exactly. Two rulers decide to test the fences. King Pem-Narayan of Cooch Behar and the King of Assam. They look at the Mughal territory bordering them, the Kamrup region, and they just launch these devastating, coordinated raids.
And reading the text, these weren't just quick border skirmishes to steal some cows. This was a systematic depopulation. They pushed into Mughal territory and stripped it to the bedrock.
Right. They captured peasants, took people into slavery, looted everything. Talish notes they left the land so utterly ruined that not a single trace of habitation remained. They erased the Mughal presence there.
But then the political winds in the Mughal capital shift. Shah Jahan is deposed, and his son Aurangzeb takes over after a brutal succession war. And if there's one thing about Aurangzeb, he does not tolerate insults to his sovereignty.
No, he is obsessed with order and absolute authority. By 1660, he looks east at the smoking ruin of Kamrup, and he appoints his best commander, Nawab Mir Jumla, to basically go get revenge.
The text calls Mir Jumla the pillar of the state, a master of the pen and the sword. So he starts moving this massive, lumbering war machine east, and his first target is Cooch Behar. Now, the king of Cooch Behar sees this army coming, and he realizes he made a huge mistake.
He panics. The reality of Mughal logistics is just staring him in the face.
So he tries to backpedal. He sends an envoy to Mir Jumla's camp with a letter, begging for a pardon. And this interaction gives us our first look at just how terrifying Mir Jumla is.
It's a masterclass in psychological subjugation, really. The envoy expects standard diplomacy, formal reading of terms, but Mir Jumla refuses to even open the letter.
It's wild. He looks at the envoy and says, "You can either take 1,000 lashes from a whip right now, or you can literally eat the letter you just handed me."
And, put yourself in that envoy's shoes. 1,000 lashes in a 17th century camp is a death sentence. The infection alone would kill you.
Right, so the envoy actually eats it. The text says he swallows the letter whole, like a fresh morsel, just to save his life. It's like a corporate negotiation where the CEO makes you literally chew and swallow the contract.
That's a great analogy. It's not just rejecting terms, it's breaking the opponent's dignity. Mir Jumla is sending a message that diplomacy is dead. This is about total conquest.
So they march on Cooch Behar. But getting to the capital is tricky. There are 3 routes. The main one, the Bugadwar route, is heavily fortified with stone walls and cannons, but Mir Jumla ignores it. He chooses the 3rd route, which isn't even a road. It's an uncharted path through a solid wall of dense jungle. Why do that? Why push heavy artillery into a swamp when there's a paved road?
Because the hardest path is usually the least defended. Mir Jumla did the math. Assaulting that stone gate would cost thousands of lives and months of time, and time is everything here because of the weather. He had to win before the monsoons hit.
So he decides to fight the jungle instead.
Yeah. The king of Cooch Behar left that route undefended because he thought it was naturally impassable. He thought the environment was his wall.
He severely underestimated Mir Jumla, because Mir Jumla turns his elite army into a logging crew, and he doesn't sit in a tent. The text says he stayed on his horse from dawn to dusk, personally driving the men and elephants to literally crush the jungle.
Refusing all the comforts of his rank. No litters, no shaded elephant howdahs, just on horseback in the heat and bugs.
And it works. They bypass the fortresses, and taking the capital is a breeze. The king of Cooch Behar just flees into the mountains of Bhutan. So the Mughals walk unopposed into this paradise. The relief in Talish's writing is palpable here. He talks about the sweet water, the pastures, the fresh green verdure that heals the eyes.
And the logistics suddenly become easy. They find so much food.
The oranges. He goes on and on about these Konala oranges. He says they're so big and juicy you don't even have to squeeze them, just press them and they fill a cup. And pepper vines climbing trees. Plus, they capture 106 heavy cannons left behind by the fleeing king.
Right, but right on the edge of this easy victory, they have this really surreal anthropological encounter.
The Bhutanese gout,
Yeah.
yes. They capture this stray elephant, and riding it is a guy from Bhutan. They bring him to the camp, and to the Mughals, he looks like an alien. White and pink complexion, long yellow hair, wearing just a white cloth.
And the intelligence he gives them during an interrogation is fascinating. He talks about his ruler, the Dharmraj.
Yeah, he claims this king is a 120-year-old ascetic holy man who only eats bananas and milk.
Which, to a Mughal commander used to opulent courts, is just bizarre. It suggests a society built on intense religious devotion.
But then he describes the infrastructure. He says Bhutan is divided by these lethal, deep river gorges, and the only way to cross is on terrifying iron chain bridges, like 1 chain for your feet, 2 for your hands, just dangling over an abyss.
And they moved horses across those.
Pure Indiana Jones stuff. It's an ominous warning that the geography is only going to get weirder and steeper. So let me ask you, how did this super easy, almost bloodless victory in Cooch Behar affect the Mughal army's psychology heading into Assam?
Well, it gave them a massive false sense of security. They felt validated. They thought, we beat the jungle, the enemy ran away, we were invincible. They assumed just their reputation would win the war.
But Cooch Behar was just the appetizer. When they finally turn east into Assam, they hit the Kamrup region, and the reality of the geography just dismantles them. Talish's tone shifts completely. They hit this botanical nightmare, a massive forest of gagara plants.
Right, xanthium indicum, cockleburs. But in this microclimate, they are monstrous. Talish says the stalks are as thick and hard as mature bamboo.
And imagine an army of tens of thousands with horses and carts trying to get through a solid wall of spiked woody weeds. They can't walk around it, so they use their war elephants as living bulldozers.
But using an elephant for continuous heavy labor in a humid jungle is exhausting for the animal. They overheat, they need tons of food and water.
Plus, the ground is treacherous. Deep mud, hidden sinkholes. Men and horses are falling in the mud, getting their feet pierced by these sharp, broken stalks. And it's so claustrophobic. Talish says men were literally suffocated by the trunks of thrashing elephants or had their ribs crushed by heavy carts in the narrow path.
They were barely making 2.5 kosses a day. That's just a few miles of agonizing progress.
The psychological toll must have been horrific. Talish writes, "Every man putting his foot on this path trusted only in God, said goodbye to the world, and walked in the plain of abandonment."
That is not the swagger of an invincible army. They are losing all their advantages. Cavalry is useless, armor is suffocating.
And it's not just the plants, it's the rivers. Every few miles, another fast river. And this brings up the story of the Nine-Sir Cannon, which just blew my mind.
Yeah, the loss of the cannon.
So they're crossing a river on a pontoon bridge, rolling this massive Nine-Sir cannon, which fires an 18-pound ball, so the gun itself weighs thousands of pounds. The bridge fails, and the cannon sinks straight to the bottom of the rapids. Now, normally, you just write that off, right?
In almost any other campaign, yes. You curse your luck and keep moving to maintain momentum. But Mir Jumla absolutely refuses. He halts the entire army and demands they get it back.
How do you recover a multi-ton iron cannon from a rapid river in 1662? They didn't have cranes.
It required an insane amount of engineering. They physically altered the geography. They mobilized thousands of men to build temporary dams upstream to redirect the river's flow.
Fighting the river itself.
Exactly. Once the current slowed, specialist divers went into the freezing, murky water for days, feeling around in the mud until they found it. Then they rigged it with ropes and used massive wooden windlasses and oxen to drag it up the bank.
The calorie expenditure for one gun is staggering. But reading this made me wonder about their broader strategy. The text says the Mughals had a huge naval fleet sailing up the Brahmaputra River alongside them. So why not just put the army on the boats? Why force them to walk through this green hell?
It's the most logical question, but it fundamentally misunderstands 17th century riverine warfare. The army and the fleet are locked in this mandatory combined arms symbiosis they can't separate.
Why? What happens if the boats just sail ahead?
The river has narrow channels. The Assamese controlled the dense jungle right up to the banks. If the Mughal boats sailed alone, the Assamese would just set up concealed cannons and archers in the tree line and fire down into the wooden boats at point-blank range. The sailors would be trapped. The fleet needed the land army to march parallel and physically clear the banks of ambushes.
Ah, so the army is the shield. But why does the army need the boats so badly? They can't forage.
No, an army of tens of thousands cannot forage enough calories in a hostile jungle. They'd starve in a week. The fleet is their floating warehouse. It carries the grain, the gunpowder, and the heaviest siege cannons.
So it's a massive, lethal, three-legged race. They are tethered together, moving at the speed of the slowest guy, hacking through giant cockleburrs.
Right. And as they break through the jungle, they hit the first line of man-made defenses. The Assamese had weaponized the environment,
Which totally neutralizes the Mughal siege cannons. The Mughals are used to shattering stone walls, but the Assamese built massive forts out of thick, compacted mud, like Jogigopa and Shriats.
And from a physics standpoint, this is brilliant. When an iron cannonball hits a rigid stone wall, the kinetic energy shatters the stone. But when it hits 20 feet of damp earth, the mud acts like a giant sponge. It displaces and absorbs the shockwave.
It's like punching a mattress instead of a concrete wall. So the Mughal artillery is practically useless, but while they're shooting at mud, the ground itself is trying to kill them with panges.
The panges are terrifying. They are essentially sharpened bamboo spikes.
But they temper them in fire, right?
Yes, fire hardening makes the bamboo as rigid as iron. They bury thousands of these just below the surface in the grass and mud.
Like ancient organic landmines. And a 17th century leather boot offers no protection. Talish tells this awful story about his servant leading a scare horse. The horse steps in some tall grass, and a pangy drives straight up through its hoof into the bone, crippling it instantly.
The infection risk in that environment is absolute. But strategically, the panges destroy momentum. If you're a commander ordering a charge, you need your men looking forward. But if every step might mean a spike through your foot, you look down, you hesitate.
The charge is broken before it starts. So the Mughals are creeping forward, staring at their boots, which leads us to the siege of Simla Fort. Talish describes this place as an impossible earthen citadel with huge walls, a deep moat full of panges, and thousands of muskets. Mir Jumla knows a frontal assault is suicide, so he tries to flank it.
Which introduces this highly cinematic moment with a double agent.
Yes. A local guy who speaks the language offers to guide the elite Mughal vanguard, led by Deller Khan, to a secret weak point. The Mughals take the bait, but the guide leads them straight to the most heavily defended gate, right into a kill zone.
The Assamese are waiting on the mud walls and unleash a massive volley from 1,000 muskets.
But Talish notes this moment of instant karma. In that very first volley, a stray Assamese bullet hits the double agent and kills him instantly. Talish says the ruse isn't bad if it kills the wicked guy.
It's a striking detail, but Deller Khan is still trapped in a horrific crossfire. He can't retreat through the Panjis under fire.
So he makes a heroic, suicidal decision. He orders a direct charge into the moat. He drives his massive war elephant straight into the water and mud. The elephant takes 25 arrows directly into his armor, and Deller Khan is deflecting arrows with his shield.
Sheer brutality. He reaches the wall, his men scale the earthen ramparts, and here is where the psychology gets really interesting.
This part confused me so much. The Assamese have this impenetrable fort, high ground, thousands of guns. But the moment Deller Khan's elephant gets inside the perimeter, the Assamese completely break and run for the jungle. Why? They had the advantage.
Because of their core defensive doctrine, the Assamese relied entirely on the illusion of invulnerability. The mud walls, the Panjis, the ambushes, it was all deterrence. They wanted the enemy to give up because the cost was too high.
So their defense was just a hard outer shell.
Exactly. They were not culturally or tactically prepared for sustained hand-to-hand combat against heavily armored Mughal veterans. Once they saw an arrow-cushioned elephant in their courtyard and swords being drawn, their morale collapsed. They knew they'd be massacred in melee combat, so they fled.
So the Mughals cracked the land forts. But Assam is a riverine empire. The ultimate battle had to be on the water. And eventually, the geography forces the Mughal army to take a detour around a mountain, separating them from their fleet.
And the Assamese naval commanders see the Mughal boats anchored without their infantry shield, and they strike.
It's a massive surprise attack. 700 to 800 Assamese boats attack the 100 Mughal boats, and they do it at night. I try to picture this. It's 1662, no radar, no lights. Pitch black on a fast river.
It's the pinnacle of sensory deprivation. The only light is from muzzle flashes. The black powder smoke settles low, thickening the dark. You can't even see the enemy until they ram your boat.
Like a claustrophobic space battle in an asteroid field. The battle rages all night in a stalemate. By dawn, the Mughals are exhausted, out of ammo, basically waiting to die. But then,
Mir Jumla had heard the cannons miles away and sent an elite cavalry division pushing through the jungle all night.
and right at dawn, they crash through the brush and line up on the riverbank overlooking the battle. And they don't shoot. They just raise their brass cavalry horns and blow them.
Pure sonic psychological warfare. The sound of those horns terrifying the Assamese. They realize the invincible Mughal land army is right there.
The Assamese panic. They abandon their boats. Talish notes that many of the rowers were Bhutanese mercenaries who couldn't even swim. When the horns blow, they scramble ashore and are just cut down by the cavalry. The Mughals capture 400 warships in one morning.
It's a textbook example of combined arms operations saving the day. And with the fleet destroyed, the capital city, Gargan, is totally exposed.
So the king of Assam abandons the capital and flees into the Namrup Mountains, which Talish says is so hot the stones melt like wax. The Mughals walk into Gargan and hit the jackpot. 82 war elephants, 3 million rupees in gold. But the most important thing they find:
the food. They find 174 massive granaries filled with rice, completely intact.
Why didn't they burn it? Scorched Earth 101, right? Don't leave the fridge full for the invading army.
It was a colossal blunder based on historical precedent. Previous invaders usually just looted the gold and left before the monsoons. The king assumed Mir Jumla was a raider, not an occupier. He didn't want to burn his own food because he expected to come back in a few weeks and eat it.
He practically handed Mir Jumla the calorie base needed to wait out the weather. So the Mughals think they won. They're lounging in the palace. And this pause gives Talish time to do some incredible ethnographic observation.
Which is really unusual for an imperial military chronicle. Talish is an educated urban Muslim trying to process a society that violates all his cultural norms.
Right, he calls them demons and savages constantly, but you can tell he's fascinated. Let's look at the food.
From a strict Mughal halal perspective, the Assamese diet was horrifying. Talish notes they eat almost any animal, pigs, rodents, regardless of how it died. They didn't care about ritual slaughter.
But the reverse culture shock is even wilder. The Assamese absolutely refused to eat ghee, clarified butter.
Right, a staple of Mughal cuisine.
The text says they were so repulsed by ghee that if they were tricked into eating it, they would become violently ill. They'd rather starve. It just shows how arbitrary food taboos are. But while Talish hates their food, he is in absolute awe of their engineering.
He explores the king's audience hall, the salon.
Yeah, supported by 66 massive, perfectly polished wooden pillars. But the craziest part, this massive structure was built entirely without a single iron nail or a drop of glue.
It relied on master-level interlocking joinery, mortise and tenon joints so precise that friction and gravity held it all together. It's incredibly resilient, especially for earthquakes.
Talish even writes, I dare to believe that on the whole earth, there are perhaps no more skillful wood sculptors than the Assamese. That is massive praise.
It shows his cognitive dissonance. He respects their minds but is horrified by their souls, especially when he looks at their burial customs.
Oh man, the burials. The Mughals practiced cremation or simple earth burial, but the Assamese royals built massive underground wooden vaults. And they didn't just bury golden elephants. They buried the king's wives and servants alive with him.
The level of societal control to enforce that is staggering.
And the most haunting detail, they'd seal a living servant inside with an oil lamp. A lamp bearer, whose only job was to sit in the dark and keep the flame lit until they starved or suffocated. Just chilling.
Yet the Mughals immediately pivot to pragmatic imperialism. They are disgusted by the practice, but they have no problem desecrating the graves. They rip the mounds apart and loot the gold.
Talish casually mentions pulling 9,000 rupees of gold from just a few tombs. The hypocrisy is real. And then Talish notes one last detail, the Assamese fighting roosters. He says these birds are bred so aggressively they will fight until their brains are exposed rather than retreat.
He's writing about birds, but he's thinking about the people. He's recognizing their unyielding spirit.
And that spirit is about to show itself. The Mughals are counting gold, but the Assamese are just waiting for their greatest ally.
The weather. The monsoons arrive.
And not just a heavy thunderstorm. It rains for 8 straight months. The Brahmaputra floods, and the whole country turns into an inland ocean. The Mughals' tactical doctrine mobility, cavalry, is completely negated.
They are instantly isolated on small, elevated islands of mud. Talish writes, the water prison is worse than an iron collar. The heavy cavalry is useless. The horses are just starving and sinking in the mud.
It's like the board game was flipped upside down. All their strengths became anchors dragging them under, and the Assamese seamlessly switched to brutal guerrilla warfare.
They know the hidden waterways. They go on the offensive with constant night raids. They build blockades and cut off all Mughal supply lines.
The story of Farhad Khan is terrifying here. He's an elite mobile commander sent to retrieve supply boats. The floods rise behind him, and he gets trapped on a small patch of mud.
The Assamese spot him instantly, navigate their shallow boats through the flooded jungle, and build heavily armed batteries surrounding him.
So Farhad Khan and his cavalry are standing in waist-deep water all night, in pitch black, getting bombarded with cannons and arrows. They can't charge, they can't retreat. He fights his way out the next morning, but the psychological damage to the army is done.
Starvation sets in, disease, fevers, dysentery rip through the camps. Talish admits if 10 Mughal infantrymen fought one Assamese, the Assamese would hunt them down.
A total reversal of power. The Assamese traded space for time, let the Mughals stretch their supply lines, and let the environment snap the trap shut. Even the great Mir Jumla gets a severe swamp fever.
And out of pride or delirium, he refuses medicine from European doctors who show up at the camp until it's too late.
So the invincible army is broken. Mir Jumla signs a hasty treaty, abandons the capital, and retreats through that same flooded jungle. He dies on the way back. It's a catastrophic failure.
The Mughal Empire reached its geographic limit. They could project power across the plains, but they couldn't hold Assam.
But the French translator's preface gives us this fascinating, tragic epilogue. How did Assam eventually fall, centuries later?
Well, the mighty kingdom that broke the Mughals eventually fractures from the inside. In the late 18th century, a massive civil war breaks out called the Moamoria Rebellion.
Driven by religious and caste tensions, the country descends into anarchy. And the king of Assam, the descendant of the guys who beat Mir Jumla, is so desperate he actually begs the British East India Company, Lord Cornwallis, for military help to keep his throne.
Initially, the British hesitate. But then capitalism forces their hand, starting with a Hanoverian merchant named Daniel Rausch.
Right. Rausch is owed a fortune by Assamese factions. He gets tired of waiting, so he just sails up the river to collect his debts. which, as we learned, is a terrible idea.
Yeah, he miscalculates wildly and gets murdered. His boats are pillaged. And suddenly the British use his murder as a legal pretext to send agents in.
The agents find total systemic collapse. Factions are literally mutilating prospective kings so they can't rule. The chaos invites the Burmese Empire to invade and commit horrific atrocities.
And the British East India Company cannot tolerate a hostile Burmese empire on the border of their profitable Bengal province.
So the British launched the First Anglo-Burmese War in 1824. They drive the Burmese out.
Right.
But when it's over, they don't give Assam back to the kings who asked for help. They annex it. They look at that rainy, muddy environment that drowned the Mughals, and they realize it's perfect for growing tea.
It perfectly summarizes the difference between military and corporate empires. The external threat of the Mughals united the Assamese, but internal division invited an empire of ledgers and contracts that bypassed geographic barriers entirely.
The Mughals trying to fight the terrain, the British simply bought it. What an epic journey. We went from the Gagara jungles to the mud forts, to the night naval battles, to the water prisons of the monsoon, and finally to British tea plantations.
It's a profound case study in how complex systems collapse when they refuse to adapt to their environment.
Exactly. And that brings it right back to you listening to this today. Think about the systems in your own life or your industry. Are you relying on overwhelming force in an environment that requires adaptability? The Mughals had the best army in the world, but they fought the terrain instead of adapting to it.
They confused their map of the world for the actual physical territory they were standing on.
Right. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Look at the structures you've built to protect yourself. If the literal ground beneath your feet turned to water tomorrow, how much of your current armor would help you swim, and how much of it would just end up pulling you straight to the bottom? Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the maps you're handed and keep exploring.